Hello, welcome. My name is Juliet Anderson, and I'm 28 years old. I was 7 years old the first time my father called me a liar in front of company. We were at my aunt's birthday dinner, and I had accidentally knocked over a glass of juice. I told him it slipped. He looked at the table full of relatives and said she always says that. Never her fault. Everyone laughed. I didn't. That moment planted something in me, a quiet bone, deep understanding that no matter what I said or did, my parents had already decided who I was. And for 21 years after that, I tried to prove them wrong. I dressed right. I spoke carefully. I apologized first, even when I had done nothing wrong. I built myself into someone unrecognizable, just to earn a version of love that was always 2 steps ahead of me. Then I met Callum Reed. He was 31, a civil engineer with steady hands and an even steadier heart. We met at a rooftop fundraiser 3 years ago. He was there for a colleague. I was there for a client. He spilled his drink on my jacket within 4 minutes of meeting me, apologized so sincerely that I laughed instead of flinching. And by the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers and a conversation that felt like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. He didn't need me to be smaller. He didn't flinch when I was direct. He asked me questions and actually waited for the answers. After 14 months of dating, he proposed in the kitchen of our apartment. No grand gesture, just him on one knee with a ring his grandmother had left him, and his voice breaking slightly when he said my name. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We set the wedding for a Saturday in late September. The rehearsal dinner was planned for the Friday before a private room at a restaurant called Brennan's. Candles everywhere. Our closest people gathered to celebrate something I had waited my whole life to feel chosen. My parents had never liked Callum. My father, Leonard Anderson, thought he was too quiet, too measured, not impressive enough by the standards he kept in his head like a ledger. My mother, Patricia, smiled at Callum's face and whispered criticisms about him the moment he left a room. I had kept my distance from their opinions for years by then. I had learned to filter them, but 14 days before my wedding, they did something I could not filter. Callum called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and his voice was different. Not angry, careful, like he was holding something fragile and wasn't sure how hard he could grip it. He told me my parents had come to see him at his office. Without telling me, without warning, they sat across from him and told him that I had been pregnant at 22, that I had given birth to a child, and that I had abandoned that baby, walked away without looking back. My father didn't say it loudly, but the word landed hard anyway. Bastard, sharp, and final, like a label he had already decided belonged to me. My mother didn't contradict him. She leaned closer to him instead, her voice low, almost intimate, as if they were sharing something private and important. She warned him softly, told him not to let me deceive him the way she believed I had deceived others. It wasn't anger in her tone. It was worse than that. It was certainty. When Callum spoke to me about it, there was no accusation in his voice, no raised volume, no sharp edges, just a quiet question, steady and careful, like he was holding something fragile between us and didn't want to drop it. He asked if there was anything I needed to tell him. That was all. And somehow, that gentleness made everything inside me collapse. I was sitting alone in my car in the dim concrete stillness of a parking garage, the engine off, my phone pressed tight against my ear. The air felt heavy, like it wasn't moving, like the entire world had paused and was waiting for me to answer. And in that silence, I felt something inside my chest give way, like the floor had opened beneath me, because there had been a pregnancy, there had been loss, and the story my parents had given him wasn't just wrong. It was something else entirely, something twisted into a shape I didn't recognize. When I was 22, I was involved with a man named Sebastian Cole. At the time, I thought he was sophisticated, composed, someone who knew more about life than I did. He carried himself with a kind of confidence that felt magnetic, but over time I realized it wasn't confidence at all. It was control, carefully disguised as charm. He always seemed slightly ahead of me, emotionally and intellectually, and I spent more time trying to keep up with him than I did understanding what I actually felt. When I found out I was pregnant, fear didn't just arrive. It took over. It settled into my bones, into my breathing, into every thought I had. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I needed space to figure it out. Sebastian didn't offer that space. He made his position clear almost immediately. He didn't want a child. Not now, not later, not under any circumstances. And when I hesitated, when I admitted that I didn't know what decision I would make, he didn't argue in obvious ways. He didn't shout. Instead, he chipped away at me slowly, methodically, until my uncertainty started to feel like weakness, until my voice felt smaller every time I tried to use it. I carried that pregnancy for 4 months, long enough to begin imagining things I wasn't ready to admit out loud, long enough for it to become real in a way that couldn't be undone. And then, without warning, it ended. A miscarriage, sudden, overwhelming, and completely beyond anything I could have controlled. There was no moment of choice, no goodbye I was prepared for, just loss, raw and immediate. There was no child I walked away from, no life I abandoned. There was only grief, heavy and consuming, and I buried it because I didn't know what else to do with it. I folded it into myself, tucked it into a place where it wouldn't be seen, wouldn't be questioned. I told almost no one, not because I was ashamed, but because I couldn't find the language for it, and time passed, and the silence around it became part of who I was. My parents knew the truth. They had been there during those days when everything fell apart. My mother had driven me to the hospital. She had sat beside me, held my hand while I waited, while doctors moved around us, speaking in clinical terms that felt disconnected from what I was actually experiencing. She knew exactly what had happened. She knew what hadn't. And yet, 2 weeks before I was supposed to be married, she sat across from Callum and told him a completely different story. She told him I had carried a child to term, that I had given birth, that I had chosen to walk away from that child and never look back. She said it calmly, as if she were offering him information he deserved to know before making a life with me. That night, I went to Callum and told him everything, not just the facts, but the feelings I had never fully spoken out loud, the relationship, the fear, the pressure, the loss, and the silence that followed. I expected questions, doubt, maybe even distance. Instead, he listened, completely, without interruption, without judgment. When I finished, he didn't interrogate me. He didn't demand explanations. He reached for my hand and said he was sorry for what I had gone through. Not sorry that I hadn't told him sooner. Not sorry in a way that implied blame, just sorrow for my pain. He sat with me in it before asking anything else. That moment told me everything about who he was. But even with that, the damage didn't simply disappear. What my parents had done lingered, like something unresolved in the air between us. They hadn't acted impulsively. They had chosen their timing carefully. They knew that doubt, introduced close enough to something as significant as a wedding, could fracture even the strongest connection. What they hadn't expected was what happened next. At the rehearsal dinner, everything had been arranged to feel perfect. The space was warm, filled with soft light and quiet laughter, the kind of atmosphere that makes you believe in new beginnings. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel normal again, to pretend the past 2 weeks hadn't happened. And then she walked in, Nora Voss, someone I hadn't seen in years, but instantly recognized. She had been there during one of the hardest periods of my life, steady in a way I hadn't fully appreciated at the time. We had drifted apart, not because of conflict, but because sometimes shared pain creates distance once it's over. She came directly to me, carrying an envelope. There was no hesitation in her, no uncertainty. She said she needed a few minutes, and I knew immediately that whatever she had brought wasn't small. Inside the envelope were records, medical documentation confirming the miscarriage, dates, details, everything clearly stated, and beneath that, something else. Messages, conversations between my mother and Sebastian. In them, she tried to convince him to support a lie, to confirm a version of events that never happened. He refused. Seeing it all laid out like that didn't create anger in me the way I might have expected. It created clarity, a quiet, undeniable understanding of who my parents had chosen to be. I walked back into the room and placed the envelope in front of them. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply told the truth, fully, calmly, and in front of everyone. They didn't deny it. They didn't defend themselves. They just sat there, so I asked them to leave, and they did. What followed wasn't chaos or confrontation. It was something I hadn't expected. Support. Quiet at first, then stronger. A room full of people choosing to stand with me without needing to be asked. 2 days later, I got married. It wasn't extravagant or overwhelming. It was honest. It was grounded. It belonged entirely to us. My parents weren't there, and for the first time, that absence didn't feel like something missing. It felt like something resolved. I had spent years believing that love from certain people was something I had to earn, something I had somehow failed to deserve. But standing there, making promises I meant, I realized that wasn't true. Some people don't change. They don't stop trying to shape you into something that suits them. The only thing that changes is whether or not you stay within their reach. And when you finally step outside of it, when you build something real and solid on your own, their voices lose their power. If you've ever had your truth rewritten by someone else, if you've ever sat in silence while someone else controlled the narrative, understand this. Your story doesn't end there. Sometimes, the moment everything feels like it's falling apart is actually the moment everything begins to become your own.